3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Mission Control, Peralta Design's podcast on all things branding and digital marketing. Since 2008, Peralta Design has launched hundreds of brands with award-winning identities and websites. Join our hosts Ramon and Jorge as they use decades of combined experience to tackle topics with past clients, industry partners, and the rest of the PD crew. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode of Mission Control.
Hey everybody, welcome to Mission Control, where we respect the grind and reclaim the American dream. I am your host, Ramon Peralta from Peralta Design, and we launch brands. Today's guest is a legend in the world of productivity and time management. His proven methods have increased productivity by 25%. The 2,000 plus presentations he's led for more than 100,000 people use humor, actionable strategies, and down-to-earth advice to help participants advance their lives. He's even been to Dubai a number of times as a professional paid public speaker and subject matter expert. Please help me welcome the president of the Productivity Institute himself, Dr. Donald E. Wetmore. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Ramon. I'm just delighted for the invite to be here and share some time with you today.
Yes. We finally made it happen.
That's right.
We've been talking about this for some time. I'm glad you're here in person, in studio. Tell our listeners your best backstory. How did you become who you are today?
By making a ton of mistakes. It'll take a lot longer than this podcast to go through, and because without them, I wouldn't have been where I am right here today. I was just a quick story. I did pretty well in school until I got into high school, and I barely graduated from high school. And
Wow.
Yeah, really true. And I grew up in Massachusetts. When I got my diploma, it was one of the biggest frauds perpetrated in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that I was a high school graduate. And but I did pretty good up until then. But I was kind of the class clown. I mean, you know, and we'd have study hall on Friday afternoon, and Miss Taylor was our proctor. And she was our English teacher, and I think everybody had. I had her when she was like 100 years old, and I'd be yakking away, and she'd come fly over in her broom, and she'd be all upset, and she had this nasally voice. And Mr. Wetmore, this is study hall, not talking hall. Yeah, if it was talking hall, you could talk, but this is study. So what should you be doing? I said study. Yeah. Thanks for the upset. Anyways, this one day, and this is early in my freshman year, and. When they say, I wouldn't shut up. I was just a real pill, and she kept coming back, and finally she explodes on me.
Oh, man.
And she screams at me. There's like 200 kids in study hall. She said, Mr. Wetmore, I've told you 8 times you be quiet, and all you do is talk. What's the matter with you? Are you deaf? Or are you stupid? Well, I'm thinking...
Those two options.
Yeah, I've never been presented with that before, and I'm thinking, so loud enough so everybody in the study hall could hear it. I looked up at her and I said, "Huh?" It was pretty funny, but she.
So you were deaf.
Yeah, I might be deaf. Mama always said, "Don't be deaf, be stupid," like that,
Oh my God.
But anyway, she pulled me aside, and here's the point of the story. And she
Yeah.
said, "You want to know something?" She says, "You're never going to amount to anything."
Wow.
Now, she didn't say, "Look, you continue on the path, you're gonna have difficulty. You're never going to amount to anything." What am I, 13, 14 years old, and this is my teacher? So my attitude was screw it, and I just went through the process, and I was the one that made the upper 2/3 possible. And when it came time to go to after high school, go to colleges and the like, I had no ambition to go to college, let alone a resume that was going to get me in. So, best place I could get into was a community college, but it was just like high school all over again. I was failing most of my classes, and so at the end of that first year, somebody suggested to me, "Why don't you consider transferring into a real college?" Which is still true today, because they need the bodies. So I transferred applied to Bentley College in Boston, real college, dormitory college, okay? And to this day, I don't know why, but they took me. But for the first time in my academic career, I was able to take some courses that I truly wanted to take. I was always interested in law, in marketing, And at the end of that first year, I was on the dean's list, okay?
Wow.
Having said that, those two experiences with Miss Taylor and that taught me two things about managing time. And my undergraduate was in accounting, so I'm kind of sensitive to time and hours and all that. But first of all, how dramatic comments that can be made to us, comments of encouragement or discouragement. And because I just by that one little conversation, and I'm not holding her that I'm a victim or anything like that, but I made choices based upon that, okay? And that was kind of important to me. And the second thing that really interested me in terms of productivity is the difference between have to and want to. When we have to do anything, boy, we find all kinds of reasons, not to do it. I can fill up your time management toolbox with all the tools that you need, but if you don't have that, if you have to do it, you kind of find ways not to do it. But when we want to do something, boy, we can move mountains. So those are two things that kind of set the stage. And then fast forward, from there, I learned a third lesson. And I finished up my undergraduate with accounting, and I decided I'd go into law, not accounting, and I got accepted to one of the law schools up in Boston. So in the fall of that year, I'm going to law school full time. But along the way, before I started there, I came across an MBA program. I thought that'd be a nice thing as well, so I enrolled in that. So now I'm doing two graduate programs at the same time. And I had to support myself because I had two tuition bills, so I had a little income tax practice. I was sort of like H&R Wetmore. And had a real estate office, and we had 15 agents working for us, selling houses on the weekends. And I had to have two businesses because I had two tuition bills. And what that taught me is there's very little correlation between the quantity of time that we put in things and what the output is over here. And I'm not saying there's no correlation. You do have to put in some time, okay? And so that was the third lesson. So fast forward, I'm now an attorney. I'm here in Connecticut, and I've really had 3 full-time careers as an attorney and as an entrepreneur and as a college professor. And it was through my appointment on the faculty at Mercy College in Dobbs Ferry that got me into the Productivity Institute.
Okay.
That brought me to this. And what happened was my boss, my department chair, asked me to put together a program on time management for our students, maybe a 2-hour program. And I got all the materials together, and it never ran because they didn't have a budget for it. And so everything in my adult life has always been an excuse to get up and speak in front of other people and be the class clown or whatever. And so I just started teaching it on my own. And it wasn't a business. I never charged for it. And I just enjoyed doing it until somebody suggested, why don't you charge money? And Mama always said, that's a good idea. So I figured, well, I'd try that.
Well, tell me more about Mama. What was home life like while you were in school? Did they encourage college? Did you have were your parents college graduates?
No, they weren't. My dad was a general contractor, and my mom went to hairdressing school. Mm-hmm. And she was a stay-at-home mom. And my sister, I'm the youngest of 3, and my sister did go to higher education. She went to nursing school. My brother chose not to. So I was the first one to really go to college. And as I mentioned, I wasn't even interested in doing that, but they were pushing, and they threatened about, taking me out of the will and all of that if I didn't do it. So, I'm a reasonable man.
But as a kid, what did you dream about being as an adult?
I wanted to be either a veterinarian or a pediatrician or a bus driver. And
good
it turns
variety.
out I didn't qualify for any one of those. So when you don't qualify for that, what do? You become a lawyer.
Well, I mean, at some point, something clicked where you became an academic because you went from, not really being, feeling like school was for you, kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. But then something clicked in college that made you feel like, this was, you got on the dean's list somehow. How did that happen?
The talent was always there, the desire wasn't, and the purpose wasn't there.
Yeah.
And one of the underlying principles that I teach in the Productivity Institute, because there's a big misunderstanding about time management and productivity. I mean, they're similar, but they're different kinds of focuses, if you will. I get asked all the time, Don, what's the silver bullet that'll make my day go so much better, more productivity, and what are the 5 things that I have to do in order to do that? So delegate more, don't procrastinate, plan, prioritize. Those things are good, okay, but there's a bigger picture, and that's what I couch in the what I call the book of life, the starting point of productivity, and my topic is personal productivity. It's just that. Productivity is not measured by everybody becoming a millionaire, running their own business, or running for president of the United States or whatever. That's how some other people define that. Personal productivity for me is writing the book of life backwards, and I utilize all the different areas of life, the 7 vital areas of health and family and financial, intellectual, social, professional, and spiritual. And the task is write a book about the book of life backwards. What do you want to be able to say about your health life on the last day of your life? What do you want to be able to say about your financial life on the last day of your life? And not what you think you can qualify for. No. If you could just wave a magic wand and there's the genie, they can grant whatever that wish is, okay? And it's not an easy task whatsoever, and it's sort of intimidating. And when I was first taught this by one of my mentors early on in my career, I took off a Friday afternoon just to do it, and I sat there, my little Macintosh computer, and I'm doing all this, and it was until midnight. My wife said, go to bed. I spent all day Saturday, all day Sunday, all day Monday working on this project. It was the most exhilarating experience I ever had, and the most frightening as well. But here's the point. When we've got clarity where we're taking this, ourselves, I call it Me Incorporated, when we figure out what it is we want to accomplish in each one of those areas, then we start to work our way backwards to ask, now, what do I got to do this year, this month, this week, and literally each day in order to get there? Because the bragging rights to a nice story at the end of life, that doesn't come to us based on what we do the last 3 days of our lives. It's doing every day of our lives. And one of the things that came to influence my thinking about this, my relationship with my dad. He was a hardworking man. He was a contractor. He worked 9 days a week. Never had any time for family. And I don't say that with any regret whatsoever. And
that's the generation too.
That was the generation. He was a good provider and all that, but he had no hobbies. But he always talked about someday I'll. It's that destination out in the mid-Pacific, where you're going to get off the gangway and they'll kiss you on both cheeks, and there's all the books I meant to read and my kids at the right age and all that, you know. And he eventually retired, sold off his business. My mom was still with us, and he wasn't rich, but they didn't have a mortgage anymore. And he was the most miserable person on the planet. And he had no purpose whatsoever, and he just couldn't get it together, Yeah. So if, you're not enjoying the game of golf today, you're not going to do it when you retire. If you're not spending quality time with family today, you're not going to be doing it when you retire. So as an attorney, I did a lot of work early on with wills and estates and all that. Maybe it was the population I was dealing with, the older population. But they were filled with a lot of regret, a lot of couldas and shouldas and wouldas. And I'm thinking, man, I don't want to end up at the end of the trail and say I got all these regrets, and I know I'll have some. Right. So that really influenced my.
So he inspired you as to, you could say, what not to do or how not to end up.
Very much so.
So that's pretty deep. Now, I'm fascinated from the branding standpoint when you said you decided. It sounds like you were purpose-driven and you started writing and you were going to, I'm going to get paid for this. You could have just called it, the Don Wetmore method, but you chose to go with the Productivity Institute, which has it's just a much bigger brand than just you. At that stage, what did you envision your company being like?
Well, let me back it up, because there was a previous name when I set out on my own.
Yeah, okay.
Talk about branding genius, okay? I called it the National Institute for Productivity Development.
Okay.
Boy.
Yeah. What is that acronym? Card. What does it stand for? I'm trying to spell it out.
Something like no ears. Felix the cat or something. I don't know. It was just kind of stupid, okay?
But it was kind of like a government agency, it just sounds like one of those acronyms that you see in Washington, D.C. building somewhere.
Yeah, I get a lot of calls from NASA and so forth. We're going to get up this rocket. How do we get it? We don't have time, Oh, you don't know. Okay, you get out of here. But I mentioned, we started right from the beginning about, the mistakes that I've made and so forth. And I made my share of mistakes. And but when I got into this by accident. I just started running it on my own, and somebody said charge money for it. Sometimes I'm my arrogance as a cocky younger man. I know all the answers, And my MBA has a concentration in marketing, so I'm a marketing genius. So when I realized this was a business, okay, and this is going back about 30 years ago, I went about and I did every stupid boneheaded thing imaginable, okay? And after about 3-4 years, I'd only trained about 400 or 500 people, and I was $150,000 in debt. True story. I spent $40,000 on a radio ad campaign that produced nothing, and Genius thought it would be just great, and print and all that sort of thing. And one of the great time management tools that I share with other people is you got to talk to the Muffin Man. And you got to get mentors. Don't try to figure it all out yourself.
Right.
Identify the people who've already accomplished the things that you want to accomplish, and speak with them and find out how did they do it. And people are generally generous and want to share that information and so on. But I didn't talk to any of the Muffin Men. And so I made all these terrible things to a point where I was just going to throw in the towel. And I really believe that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Right.
And across my desk came a flyer from the local chapter of the National Speakers Association, which is our trade organization. Mm-hmm. And those are wonderful professional associations and trade associations where the Muffin Men and women are, who have done that, the things that you need to do. And I went to one of their conferences, and eventually I joined the national organization. First 6 years in business, I trained 600 people. From the next 14 years, I trained over 100,000 people.
Wow. Now, what was the biggest audience you trained at once?
Probably, I was doing a lot of work with the Subway Corporation and invited to their national conferences and their conventions, and where I'd have groups of probably 5,000-10,000 people.
Wow. And how do you measure success when somebody goes to one of these? I noticed, in your opening there, the most productivity workshops create a 5% improvement, but you tout, a 25% improvement. Where do the metrics come in? If somebody sits in one of your workshops, what's the guarantee that their life's going to dramatically change?
There is none, and I tell them that, and I'm asked that a lot. My coaching and so on. Do you guarantee the results and everything? No, I don't. I really don't, because I know two things though. I know one thing and another thing I don't know. Number one is I know my stuff works, but secondly, I don't know if you work.
Right.
You got to you've got to make it work.
Faith without works is dead. You've got to actually execute.
But on that issue, why the results, and we have ways of documenting that and going through a little time log and an assessment where you are now and where you are afterwards a year from now. Mm-hmm. The overall success of seminars right across the board is about 5% after a year's time, which is okay if you do enough of that, okay? And I was really struck by that when I was getting into the seminar business, because most of those things out there in sales training, customer service, I mean, they're good, and otherwise it wouldn't last. Why is it that there's so little compliance, if you will? And I think I found part of the answer, and we incorporate this in all the programs that I do. Most programs are good at telling you what you have to do and how to do it. Mm-hmm. Ramon, you have to manage your time. Here's how you do it, and here's a book, and blah, 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 blah. What's missing is the big part of the equation, and that's the why. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with adult learners, and if I'm training a bunch of high school kids on the authority as me as a teacher, they're going to do what I tell them. But when I'm dealing with adults, and they're not going to take my say-so. And what we're asking people to do is to move from point A to point B, changing behavior, and that's the hardest thing for all of us to do as adults. We like our little comfort zones. So just being told what to do and how to do it is not enough. You have to explain to them why. And I spend a lot of time in my coaching and my presentations and all that to talk about the why, because the big motivator for all of us to improve our productivity, and I'm helping people to improve their productivity, is I got to answer the question, what's in it for me?
Right.
Not what's in it for me literally, but what's in it for you. And that's why our programs are so successful. That not only do I show people what to do and how to do it, but the why behind that, I keep reinforcing that.
And what do you find is the most common roadblock that people have? Is it depression? Is it procrastination?
It's the people they hang around with. That's probably the number one thing, and we talk about that in a lot of the classes. There are two kinds of people. There are enablers and there are disablers. Now, in addiction recovery, the word enabler has a negative context, but in the context of productivity, the enabler is a very positive thing. An enabler is somebody who believes in what you can do it. They've already done it, or at least believe that they can do it, and they give you not the negative Miss Taylor stuff, but the positive things. You can do that, Roman. You can overcome that, and so on. The disablers, and by a margin of 3-1, there are more disablers out there than others. And oftentimes the people that are going to discourage us the most are the ones that are closest to us, that love us the most. And you just listen to the messages that we hear growing up. You know, you're going to get a house in today's market on your salary. You've never done that. You know, you're going to lose 50 pounds. You've never done that before. You know, I like you just the way you are. You know.
Or you sound just like your father, or one of those.
No, but I sound like my mother, you know. You're going to get new furniture. You know, we weren't in our 40s before we got new furniture. Where are your priorities? Yes, Mama.
And if you're living in a bubble, you're destined, you know, for failure, because you're not getting inspired. You're not meeting enablers. And I think that, without going into getting out of my lane too far, but if you're around people that are codependent or have an advantage to keep you down, so to speak, then you're really, you're not going to crack through that.
Mama told me, maybe told you, your mama told you too, you know, you don't go to the pool hall, you don't hang around with the bad kids, and that's true. That's good advice, and it's good advice for us in our adult lives, okay? And it's not a snobbish thing. It's not a judgment thing at all. But you got to be careful of the people that you're hanging around with.
And I think for business owners, if we bring it back to them and entrepreneurs, you've got to be a little bit crazy to run your own business or want to. And so if you can't have, peer groups of other entrepreneurs or peer groups of other business owner networking groups and those kind of things are good places to be, because your ideas might not sound as crazy to them as to someone else who really doesn't have high aspirations or thinks it's safer to have a job versus have a business. So when you deal with business clients or entrepreneurs, what do you kind of suggest that they do as far as their peer groups? Because their families, I know from firsthand experience, I can't go home and start talking about payroll or this and that. My wife's a school teacher. God bless her. She loves it. But I have to have those kind of conversations with other business owners if I want to get any kind of real good feedback.
The answer is as a dear mutual friend of ours who wrote a book about this, Who Do You Need to Meet? Mm-hmm. And who is it that, who are the muffin men and women that you need to associate with?
Right.
That have had their successes, that will give you the kind of encouragement and good constructive criticism and so on, and and those business groups and networking groups, we've all belonged to those. Some more successful than others, but going to these groups, even if you're not there for a specific purpose of getting leads and all that sort of thing, just going to a networking group, one of these private groups or chambers groups or whatever, you're in that environment. Right. And at least thinking that way, it's almost like, if you want to learn tennis, hire a tennis pro and get down on the court, but I can't do that. All right, so at least go to a tennis match and just watch it and see it, and you're kind of, getting your mindset and going forward.
Tell me about Dubai, because when we first met in one of these networking groups, networking and diners, I believe, you mentioned to me, this is pre-COVID, and we're going to talk about how that has affected your business, but you were traveling, you were getting hired out in the Middle East to go and teach productivity, and I was fascinated with how they perceive the Westerners or our methods, or so tell me a little bit about how you got into that. I know the short version is just, write a book and then they'll hire you, but there's got to be more to it as a subject matter expert to go there and tell me a little bit about the culture and the language barriers and things like that.
It came about from a referral. Part of my networking group, one of my enablers, and he was teaching communication skills, and he had tied in with this booking agent on the Middle East, and he was invited to go over, and it was long story short, I was introduced, and this company is called Medics International, and they specialize in bringing American speakers on a variety of topics who are published authors and have international experience. So I was privileged to be invited to come over. And my first visit was to go to Dubai. It was scary.
Yeah.
It really was. I felt like a little kid going on, the school bus. My wife wanted to put a tag on mine, if his name is Donnie, send him back to the United States, and my host, Ayman Mustafa, he and I became very close friends very quickly, and very accommodating and so forth. And so I start my first class, and the half the people don't speak English, and so I have a translator with me, and I've got to kind of go through that. I've got 5 days worth of material, okay, but I got to repeat it twice,
Right.
and I'm learning all of this sort of thing. Anyways, long story short, over the last 10 years prior to COVID, I don't know how many trips that I've made over there through them to the different countries. The attitude is extraordinary. They're the most rewarding programs I've ever done, and they are so appreciative of, for all the talk that we hear about, the Arab Street Americans and the political stuff.
Right.
They have great respect for the entrepreneurship, and they don't have that kind of a system. And they're a tribal culture, and so meeting people initially, you can feel this like a little, a barrier there, and so you kind of you can't just go and grab somebody and shake their hand, and kind of work your way into it. But they are very, very hospitable. They get certificates presented at the end. It's like they're graduating from Harvard University. They cherish that. The relatives show up for the ceremony. They always contribute to buy a class gift for the instructor. It's a very emotional kind of a thing. So it was really good. And I one of my first trips over there, my agent suggested that I learn an Arab greeting, and which I thought, well, that was kind of cool, 'cause I speak English. And the greeting is, in Arabic, goes something like, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Exactly,
Yeah.
meaning roughly, peace be with you. And the response is, alaikum assalam.
And there's a response to that.
Alaikum assalam, yeah. So anyways, I'm being introduced. Okay, Dr. Wetmore from New York, blah, 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 and everything. Will you welcome him? This is all done through the translator, and I get up and I say, Assalamu alaikum. And they go, alaikum assalam, and they're looking at me, and they're going, this is really cool, And that's the last Arab words you're going to hear from me. And so, but it's just, we connected, okay?
You have to, and I think that's a sign of respect. I mean, whenever I travel, I like to at least learn hello and thank you and a couple of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Just so that they feel like, okay, he's humbling himself to at least acknowledge our culture, and that goes such a long way. Otherwise, we get the other reputation of the Americans that are just entitled and rude and arrogant and so forth.
Well, they got a great sense of humor, and they really do. And so it's like the third or the fourth day, and I start off the program, and I'm standing up there. There's the guys with the headdresses, and they're looking at the floor, and they got the ear.
What are you wearing, by the way, like a three-piece suit?
Yeah, just a regular suit and everything. And I started off, and I said, listen, I went to the trouble of learning a traditional Arab greeting when we met first, and I said, now I think it's time I teach you a traditional American greeting. And they're all,
oh, God.
Well, this is good, And I'm standing up there, and I said, well, I come from the United States, and it's just outside of New York City, the East Coast. And it goes like this, and I'm gesturing, with my hand. How you doing?
Like a Tony Soprano
like
move?
a Tony Soprano. And they go to the translators, and they're going, they go, how you doing? And I go, the word for no in Arabic is no, la la. I go, la 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 la, feeling, how you doing? And they finally got it to, how you doing? And the rest of the time they see, oh, Godfather, how you doing? And it was great. It was only 10 days in the prison. It was worth it. I really loved it. But culturally, the treatment of women and everything, I mean, it's a whole different world, okay?
Yeah.
And Dubai is more liberal, more pro-Western. They want to become a financial center. If you just woke up in Dubai not knowing where you were, you'd swear you're in U.S. or Europe or something like that. There's Citibank and Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I spent some time in Saudi Arabia, and it's way on the other side, and they're very, very devout in dress and all of that. And the separation of men and women, I mean, simple little things of holding a door and all that sort of thing. So he's doing my first.
I think the classes are segregated.
They are. It was stunning. And I my first program in Saudi Arabia, and they set up a divider down the middle of the room, and the women on this side and the men on this side, and there was a curtain between me and the women. They could not see me face to face.
Oh, wow.
And it was on a monitor. I mean, it was just so kind of freaky. And at one of the breaks, one of the women came up to myself and the interpreter, and she had a couple of questions. We're sitting and chit-chatting. I mean, that happens, in seminars. Mm. My agent happens to come by the door, and he comes over and he says, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If the morality police, get that? Morality police. If they saw you doing that would end this. You mean for the day? No, that would be it. You'd be on a plane. You get out of here. 2 men with 1 woman. Right. Gee, thanks for telling me.
Wow.
And it was just really tough to get my head around that.
Yeah. That's insane. Now, obviously, with COVID, you're not traveling overseas as much. Are you doing any of these trainings now over Zoom?
Yeah, when COVID hit, I half my practice is doing on-site work. Mm-hmm. I had a whole 14-day trip planned to go through the Middle East in March, later on in March in 2020, and the other half is one-on-one coaching. Face-to-face. I don't do Zoom stuff or anything. I just want to be face-to-face. So all of a sudden, COVID, and the world has changed. And I had to cancel all of my engagements for the rest of the year. And it was over $100,000 in bookings.
Wow. And
so I'm sitting there kind of crying in my beer, woes is me, but I started to talk to some muffin men. But within times of crisis, the need for coaching is accelerated. My coaching practice accelerated. It tripled. And actually 4-fold increase. I went from 3 clients to over 12 clients.
Wow.
And most of them were distance from Zoom. So now we're coming out of the COVID. So actually, financially, it worked out very, very well. Made our budget and exceeded that. But now we're getting back into doing our public program. We had our first one in December, and we're putting it on the schedule now. I'm getting some inquiries about clients. Can you come up to Boston and do a 5-day program and so on? But I'm in love with Zoom now and that coaching because that
it's expanded your territory
worldwide.
Yeah. So my next question was what were some of the changes that are now going to be part of your business model? It sounds like now you've expanded your client base.
Absolutely, because what I was doing before is I'd have to get in my car and I'd drive down to Norwalk and spend an hour with a client, and then after an hour come back, then I have to drive up to Danbury and everything. Now you could do one right after the other, much more efficient, much more fun. And it's I've been able to adapt so that I can communicate and read and body language and all that sort of thing just as effectively.
Tell us a little bit about your book, because you're an author. And did the classes come before the book, or did the book come first and then you started kind of teaching from the book?
No, the book came afterwards.
Okay.
And that was, I was probably in the business about 7 or 8 years, and they're saying, you got to get a book. I don't have a book. You got to get a book. So I used to write articles and all that. So the way I wrote my book was I just self-published it. And what I did is I just dictated it and had it transcribed. And it was 100 pages that came down to, and I put a title on it called Beat the Clock. And I joke about my publisher. It was McGraw-Hill Staples, They just printed it, and that's what I did. And as it turns out, it was my first book, and it's really, over the years, it's been now 20-something years. The book has been out there. I sold over $100,000 worth of the book, okay, which is really kind of interesting. So anyways, next step is I get a call a few years out and from a literary agent in New Jersey, and they saw my book. They saw some articles. There was one of the main publishers' houses in Madison Avenue was interested in doing a time management book. Can I represent you? And that led to the first published book, Organizing Your Life. And that was very successful. And they did an initial run of 25,000. It sold out within a few months, and they went to a second printing. But then that led to a second book with Random House, my agent got for me, called The Productivity Handbook. And I've written a few other books as well. But that's how it all kind of came about.
Wow. And what? Is there any curriculum that goes along with your books that you use in the class?
My curriculum runs 38 training days.
Okay.
And I tell people that, how do you even come up with 38 minutes to talk about time management and productivity? Because most people have a very narrow view of it. You got to have a to-do list and all that, and certainly that's important, okay? But I take a look and I put together programs that deal with a lot of the things that are keeping us from being productive: communication skills, stress management, certainly information management, marketing, all of that. So if somebody were to engage me, and it's never happened, I suspect it never will, but if they wanted to engage me for my whole curriculum, literally, I could almost give a doctorate in personal productivity. And when I work with clients, I don't have any standard thing off the shelf kind of a stuff. Every program that I do, every coaching engagement is always a unique, specialized program for their needs.
I want to take a quick detour before I want to come back to who your ideal clients are, but one of the things I picked up in your materials, you mentioned that you're the dad of 4 kids who adults now, but that they are all experts in time management. So
yeah.
how did you do that? How did you bat 1,000 with all 4 of them? Because there's always one that kind of does his own thing.
Well, that's true, and that was my example. I suppose I didn't pick up on that, you know. I don't. First of all, you're not a prophet in your own land.
How did they even listen to you, right? I mean,
and they didn't.
Yeah.
And I'd we'd be around the dinner table, and I'd say, and if that was a better planning, Dad, you're not in the classroom. Okay, I'll go shut up. So we got the public program, okay, and my wife and I, Nancy, we said we're not going to push the kids or anything, but we'd like to see if they want to come. So my oldest, Jennifer, when she got to be about 16, I think, she was going to St. Joe's, and she said, yeah, I'd like to attend. Would it be okay? That's pretty good, So anyway, she came, and she loved it. And the issues were a little bit different. Instead of how to manage your customers, how to manage your teacher, and we had to kind of tailor it for it. But she in turn sent her friends. She came back and reattended the program a couple of times, and so that's how they were kind of introduced to it.
Any legacy opportunity do any one of them want to take over the business?
No, and and again, I don't want to push them. Two of my kids became lawyers. And my daughter actually married a lawyer, so there's 4 of us. And when we get together, it's not a pretty sight. I can imagine. But no, they've chosen their own paths, and that's fine.
Okay.
I would have welcomed that. But I growing up, my dad is contracting business. He had an equipment rental business. I worked there all throughout college and high school and all that. And the plan was to take it over with my brother. Mm-hmm. And we decided to different plans, so we didn't do that.
Tell me a success story with a client. Like, how did you impact their business in a positive way through this program?
Everybody gets something different. Getting more productivity, less stress and all that, but some specific examples. I was working with an attorney who came to me. He was devastated. He was filled with all kinds of stress and all sorts of things. His relationship with his wife was on the rocks, and he was looking at giving better than 50% of everything he ever worked for in his adult life, and how that all goes.
Yeah,
and it was affecting his everything about his life. He had lost weight, and he wasn't getting clients, wasn't servicing them, and so forth. We worked together for 6 months. The marriage came back, and we talked about different strategies in order to rebuild it. Relationships, divorces, and I've done so many as an attorney, 95% of relationship breakup is on account of a lack of communication. And so because most people getting together, they're good people and all that, but they're not communicating. I mean, there was a statistic I came over, the American Management Association found that the average working professional, that's you and I, we spend less than 2 minutes a day in meaningful communication with our spouse or significant other. And I don't know about you, but I can't get my story out in 2 minutes a day, you know? You know, it's like I talk about my buddy Doug. He's a contractor. He works 9 days a week and all this, and his lights go out. He has no time for anything, no time for family, nothing whatsoever. His lights go out for a couple of hours. I said, what did you do? He said, I didn't do anything. He says, the light was out and my phone was dead. I said, what did you do? He said, well, I talked to my wife. I said, how'd that work out? He said, she seems like an interesting person. So in any event, he rebuilt the...
This goes back to your balance, because we're going to get to the URL and everything. So,
but with this client and everything, we talked about the antidote to that is to rebuild that communication. He was able to save that marriage. On another level, I'm working with a CPA, and he's got a very successful practice. And I do a lot in this area, helping companies and professionals to build up their client base and volume. We met 2 years ago. His volume was 250,000. At the end of the first year working together, it was 450. Last year it was 620.
Wow.
And next year it's going to be 700.
So they more than pay for your services.
Much more. Yeah. Always a 10-to-1 payback and a return on investment with the work that we do. Yeah.
How do you define productivity?
Productivity is living the life that you intend to live. Productivity is arriving at the end, having accomplished the things that you wanted to do in all of the 7 vital areas of life. Productivity is not making mistakes. They're teachers, and they're the building blocks to get us to where we want and to come to the end of life and say it was a life well lived.
And do you think most people are on that path?
I think they are to one degree or another. I always start my programs by saying, I got the best job in the world. I don't fix broke people. The people that we come in contact with, and I get it across the entire spectrum, everybody's productive. That's not the issue. I'm not there to show people how to become productive. They don't need me for that. They already are there, and they're living the life. The issue is how much more productive can you be? That's where I come in.
Awesome. Now, what's an ideal client for you, and what's the best way for them to reach you?
The ideal client for me, there's only 3 reasons to have a coach, or to come to a seminar for that matter. You're at point A in your life. That's where we all are. And you want to be somewhere else. Okay, my marketing sucks, my relationships are bad, or my career is whatever. And so there's only 3 reasons to have a coach. Number 1 is you don't know what point B is. Okay? Or number 2, you know what point B is, but you really don't know how to get there. Or number 3 is you know what the next point should be, point B, and you know how to get there, but you can't do it on your own. So somebody who's got an issue with they need to be somewhere else and they don't know how to get there, or they don't know what it is, or they need an accountability content, that's the ideal client for me. The type of people that I focus in on are particularly everybody's got time management issues, but I like to focus in on folks in financial services. That's my background. In the professions, in the trades, contractors and who are good at their trade, but they're not really good at business development. But I've had the spectrum right across the board. I mean, of people from the highest levels in corporate America to everybody else in between.
And what's the best way for them to reach you or find you?
Go to our website, which is balancetime.com, or call me directly on my cell. I'd be pleased to chat with you. It's 203-394-8216.
Awesome. What's one piece of advice you can leave our listeners with, our entrepreneurs, small business owners that will fire them up for 2022?
I'd ask them to take a look at the cork board that they have in their wall, and I had on mine, and I have a little saying up there, and it said, "Today is the first day of the rest of my life." And I learned a long time ago that that's never true. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real thing. Today, is not the first day of the rest of your life. Like you got a rest of your life. None of us does. Yesterday's a canceled check, and tomorrow's nobody's IOU. All we have is today. And I took that down, and I have on my wall, today is the last day of my life. and I don't mean that literally, I want to have a whole lot more days and everything, but if we have that sense of urgency, we really believe that today is our last day. How many of us would get upset about the petty little crappy things that people go crazy about, the road rage and stuff like that? I can't do anything, the traffic and all that sort of thing. If it's the last day in life, you're going to have that urgency in order to do it. And that gets you to the point where you say, let's do it and take action. I had a student of mine who was a sales manager, and his pride and joy was his little 4-year-old daughter. And he had wanted to take her on a vacation. And he said, coming up now this summer, he says, you know about me, and can you give me some advice? How can I be sure that I take my 4-year-old on vacation this summer? And I thought about it for a moment, and I said, you have to take her on vacation when she's 4 years old. If you don't take a 4-year-old, you can take a 5-year-old, and that's great. But you're not going to have a second shot at that. There's only one way to tell your 70-year-old mother that you love her. You got to tell her when she's 70 years old. That's all. Right. You get the idea? Yeah. It's about urgency.
The time is now.
Time is now.
Time is now. Thank you, Don, for being on our show. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure as well. Thank you so much.
All right.
God bless.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. To learn more about Peralta Design and our work, go to www.peraltadesign.com and subscribe to keep up with the crew.